My guest today is an archaeologist. Not like that. He's a real one. He holds 2 doctorate degrees in archaeology. He's an attorney who's done extensive research on myths and their impact on modern archaeology and on storytelling. He's also an educator whose Facebook page is there to promote science. It's called Dr. Geek's Laboratory of Applied Geekdom. He's also the author of books, both fact and fiction. Now, Scott, I know you as Dr. Geek, but you're also an archaeologist, a trained archaeologist. What are you doing in Florida? What's there to dig up in Florida?
Well, when I was I have not practiced archaeology since I've been here. But when I was living on the island of Kauai in the state of Hawaii, and I was the senior archaeologist for my company on the island of Kauai. And so my job was pretty simple. I'm the third guy in the company to have a PhD in the discipline. So I was the one that could write off on the records and all that sort of stuff and do all the reports. But basically, when it comes to archaeology in the modern day, on something like Kauai, you have to understand that the ancient civilizations would be resting exactly where the modern day one would be. Because there's only so far from the ocean you want to go, and there's only so far up the mountain that you can go. So it's not a matter of if you're going to find something if you dig, it's when. And because of that, especially in Hawaii, it's governed by statute that if you're going to do something that touches the ground, you trigger at least an archaeological assessment. And then you go from there, depending on what you find and all that sort of stuff.
And what did you find?
Well, we found a couple times where people were putting in a pool in their backyard. And there's been 1 or 2 times where there was a burial, an ancient burial that was on the property. And at that point, there's all sorts of things that trigger, because you have to balance the right of the current landowner with preserving history and and the rights of the indigenous population and all that stuff. So you work with the homeowner to maybe adjust their construction plans not to disturb anything.
So I've got this perception that scientists are a little group of people who huddle together and talk among themselves.
Well, I know a lot of scientists that are very open, but I think that idea of the cadre of old men, with their secrets, is just, it's part, because for a long time it was like that, because what you're thinking of is probably post World War II nuclear scientists.
People in white coats,
black rim glasses, and I'm just as guilty. The character of Dr. Geek wears the white coat, wears the big specs, and I'm doing that on purpose. But whenever I engage people about science, I tell them, the fun thing is anyone can do it, and in fact, everyone basically does it. You do practice the skills of the scientific method your entire life. You may not know it, you may not think of it that way, but it all comes down to having an idea, wanting to test it, and being critical about what you see. There's this great quote that says that when you go to school, not to learn specific facts and figures, but how to learn and how to think and stuff like that. And so critical thinking is like the biggest thing we could do for any generation going forward. And things never change. Let me give you a perfect example. When I was in middle school, I was finally in a math class that allowed us to use a scientific calculator on an exam. And I thought, well, this will be easy, right? I've got the calculator. I know how to operate the calculator. How can I get any question wrong? And I was in the middle of a test, and the teacher was going up and down the rows, and he stopped and he looked at me, and he looked at what I was doing, and he said, double check number 8. And I'm like, oh, what? And I looked at it, looks fine to me. And I ultimately, got the test back, got that question wrong, and with a note saying, see me. So I go and talk to the teacher after class. And I said, look, here's, it's okay that you got this wrong. Let me show you why. But more importantly, when I told you to look at number 8, you should have been able to tell based on the numbers you were getting that you were way off. And that just because the calculator said X doesn't mean that that's correct. What happened is you accidentally hit this key here, and that created this output. And so don't always just blindly trust what you see, right? Okay, push forward several decades, and now I'm teaching science, and we have a situation where everybody is super dependent on their iPad, and something's came up, and I said to a student, hey, you should probably relook at what you're doing, and they went ahead and just blindly copied what was on the screen, just because after all the iPad's smarter than I am. You know what I mean? And so it all comes back. I don't care how many more centuries in the future or how many centuries in the past. It's really being able to sit there and go, do I trust myself to know what I don't know, and what doesn't feel right? What doesn't, I may not understand why this, why I'm uncomfortable with this, but I'm now going to investigate it further. There was a link you sent me about a gentleman that does some really good science communication. And in his first episode, he talked about how there's this motto: take by no one's name, by no one's word. And it's about not taking someone else's word for what you want to believe. You have to be able to think critically for yourself. What you can do to get involved in things like this, if you think you like archaeology or the practice of science, but you're inspired because of a fictional source like Doctor Who or Stargate, let's not belittle that. Let's actually embrace that and encourage it and say, hey, it's wonderful that Dr. Jackson can translate every language known to man, and he takes 10 seconds to do it. But did you know that it took teams of people months and years with the Rosetta Stone?
So do you think science is taught wrong in schools? Do you think it should be taught through fiction?
That's a great question. For me, I'm dating myself here, but for me, the James Burke programs, Connections, The Day the Universe Changed, that's how I view a good way to teach history and to teach science and to teach social science.
Stonehenge here is a calendar. On a certain day, the sun comes up right between two particular stones, and that's how they use this place to tell them the date back then. That's why some people think Arthur is really the Welsh sun god, and the 12 Knights of the Round Table, the 12 months of the year.
With his programs, there was a very strong narrative that made it simple to understand, but in a way that seemed more practical.
Say you drop the apple. Okay, no problem. Here it is, falling. Except, due to the fact that the Earth spins as it travels in space, the apple's really going this way. Unless, that is, the solar system happens to be turning like this as it travels through space, so that the apple's doing this. Mind you, if our galaxy's turning, then the apple's really turning. Unless our local section of the cosmos is going this way, in which case that's what the apple's doing. Unless the universe is expanding and contracting. So, unless you know your frame of reference, you can't say the apple's falling.
And he was able to make a direct line of connection from one technology to another, to one improvement after another.
If you release those two gases into a confined space with a hole at the other end of it, and mix them as you do so, and then set light to them, you get that.
So how do you keep that sense of wonder alive in a kid? I mean, I was a great space fan as I was young. I knew everything about Sputnik and the Mercury space program and the Apollo space program, and the moonshot, and then all of a sudden, it stopped. Why do you think that happened?
Well, okay, I can guess, and I can think that for a lot of people, when we lost Challenger, that put a big stop on U.S. manned spaceflight, and because it was such a tragic loss, because it became at a point where things seemed almost too perfect. We were having regular missions into space. Here we have a teacher. She's not an astronaut in the traditional sense, but she represents, in any case, she represented more. People could identify with her, and it felt like we were turning that corner into something more where it was a a regular profession, kind of, hey, I'm going to take the Moonliner up to work today. I'll be back in 3 weeks, kind of a thing. And so it's very hard to kind of reassess with all that. And I think that ultimately is the problem. If you don't have a political motivation, such as the Cold War, pushing you along to try to make goals and make those goals clearly understandable to the general public as to why it's important that we get there first. If you don't have that, and you don't have the average person's involvement, they're going to tune out. I still say that there is, we're getting kind of a second chance with the exploration of space, because governments and private business have started to kind of come to terms with one another and come to some sort of agreement. One of the wonderful, great things about living in Florida is I got a chance to go to the Space Center and actually talk to an astronaut who had captained one of the space shuttles. And I was asking him about the privatization of space, because that was one of our really early topics on Dr. Geek's laboratory. And I said, how do you honestly feel about it? And he got misty-eyed a little bit, and but he said, honestly, I have got to come to terms with it. Let small business have the area close to orbit. Let them deal with that, and space stations and whatnot, and give NASA the chance to go beyond the solar system.
It is likely that the universe stretches infinitely beyond this barrier, and it is there that its hypothetical boundaries are to be found. The objects beyond this barrier are referred to in a number of ways: multiverse objects, parallel universe objects, to name but two.
It's right now, all people can see is super millionaires being able to go up into space. But somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to fund that. And every time you have somebody like a William Shatner being able to go up, I think that's fantastic.
If everybody in the world needs to do this.
Okay, so when you look at science, or even when you look at history, it's a matter of interpretation, isn't it? Let's take dinosaurs. How do we know that dinosaurs looked the way that dinosaurs are supposed to look? After all we've got are bones.
When I was growing up, if you could ask me what color is a dinosaur, well, they're all green because they're all lizards, and and that was every interpretation of a dinosaur while I was growing up. And then all of a sudden, somebody said, "Well, actually, they have all sorts of color pigments." And and stuff like that, and it got to be.
Hang on, how did they know that?
Because it's an educated guess based on the fact that they believe that if certain dinosaurs evolved into modern day birds, and modern day birds have colorful plumage, that coloration could have been something that was there all along.
Modern day birds have feathers, don't they? So do we assume that dinosaurs had feathers?
Yes. Some of them had proto feathers.
Now I know you're a sci-fi fan. So to end with, let me ask you this. Why is sci-fi so important?
Because it is a space where you can be allowed to dream and to challenge ideas and come up with something completely and utterly wacky, and see what that would look. If the universe worked that way, how would that play out? And so it's a great what if. So I think that's important, and I think it also because there's all sorts of different types of science fiction, right? So if you're more like Star Trek or Stargate SG-1 or something like that, where there's an attempt to try to have a toehold connection with real society and real technology and stuff like that, then there is this an idea about where what we might be able to see in the future. What's ahead for me, that kind of a thing. And then when it comes to the space operas like we would say Star Wars or Doctor Who, what's great about that is that sometimes you're allowed to meet people that you shouldn't be able to interact with or have a much greater impact on the universe. You did something and all of a sudden all things have changed, and all that sort of stuff. So it's a great tool for the imagination.